so what I'm going to talk about today is an idea about natural asset management. And this is something that is of increasing interest in Canada. And I think it has some applications to healthy soils. And one of the real challenges that we've been describing and we face is having sort of an information framework for integrating the consequences of our decisions and throughout all of the things that go on in a city. So sort of a management structure for soils. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. And there we go. So just in any kind of problem that we're trying to solve, there's a basic sort of framework that we go through to solve it. I mean, we identify the problem, we figure out what the current status of the resources we have are and what the knowledge gaps are, which is kind of what we're doing today. And we generate a bunch of ideas for solving it. We consider these solutions, evaluate, test them, and then we carry it out. And so that's just the basic way that we approach problems in general, and whether we're designing something or working on any other kind of problem. So when it comes to soils, however, it's challenging to think about how we do that. And particularly, I want to focus on the aspect of assessing the current status and the knowledge gaps. And I want to suggest that our lack of ability to do this effectively really hampers our ability to make progress in achieving healthy communities and sustainable cities. So as we've heard today, we've made tremendous progress in this area. I mean, Los Angeles is very fortunate to have its soils mapped, and we heard Randy's presentation this morning. But I think there's also another sort of smaller scale way of looking at this that I'd like to suggest to you. So in the past, as Rich alluded to this morning, our assessment of urban soils was really simple. We just said, they don't really look very good. It doesn't look healthy. Doesn't look like it's going to support life. And so we just kind of ignored them. And as Randy described, I mean, urban sites were pretty much grayed out on the soils maps. And many of the people have today, conversing in the chat room have been describing how a lot of our soils knowledge is based on an agricultural rural framework, and we just kind of ignored what's going on in cities. And this is a picture of me, and Rich will remember this. We were at a conference and we had breakout rooms, except they were in person instead of over Zoom. And this was the title of our room, Urban and Degraded. And that's really sums up how sometimes urban soils have been kind of written off. But now we have to be smarter and more integrated. So currently, or to some extent, I mean, urban soil assessments are often done on a project basis. So I know a lot of people here work in landscape design or in other things related to that. And site assessment is a best practice in any kind of sustainable site design. It isn't always done, but this is something done at a small scale, and it includes soil assessment. And so when we think about assessing soils and understanding what we have, there are really three scales. There's mapping, there's the parcel or site scale, where we might look for clues about land use history, as Kirsten was referring to supplement the map. And then we might create a sampling plan for soils, actually take measurements at a tree level or a garden level or a community garden or whatever, our front yard or backyard or a park. So just for a quick example, in this picture, you might have a map of this site, but you can also see from the topography that it's been heavily graded and worse. This person this is actually my husband. He's standing on a large depth of fill soil, so human transported material. And so he can decide from looking at this kind of what to expect is going on underground and develop a sampling plan and take measurements of this. But the question is this really helping us to manage our soil resource over the long term? So we take measurements on a site scale, but then what do we do with that information, and are we losing it? And so the traditional process is we map, we have objectives, we have an assessment strategy, we go out, we measure, we take samples, and then we make decisions about management or planning or design. And increasingly, cities, as we're discussing this entire symposium, is that we're expecting and hoping that soils are going to support healthy life in the cities and provide all kinds of ecosystem services. So this becomes very complex. The assets that are represented in soils have many, many facets. And so how do we possibly kind of track and value that? So better data about assets, including soil, can translate into better decisions. And so just to give you another quick example, this is a site where a car wash is to be built, and there was no recognition of the value of the soil assets that were damaged in this development process. They were never identified, they weren't measured, their loss was not noted on any balance sheet, and so they really just didn't figure into the planning process. So the concept of asset management is if for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a business practice, and it's a decision support framework that essentially covers the extended life of an asset, which could be a bridge or a lamppost or anything. And it draws from engineering as well as economics, and it considers a diverse array of assets. So trees, for example, could be in there, as well as trash cans, all kinds of different things. So it's a very common practice among municipalities or for gray infrastructure. And we certainly, have an extensive asset management program here on the University of British Columbia campus. And you can track changes in asset value or condition over time. And usually this is depreciation. Of course, in the case of natural assets, that's sometimes reversed. And it lets you know how long it will last, what you have, how long it will last, and how much it might cost to replace it when you have to replace it, if that can be done. So for natural resources like trees and soils, they can actually increase in value. And then we have all other kinds of resources that aren't mapped necessarily that relate to it, like compost. And it can kind of put the brown infrastructure that Rich discussed into the management mix. And so just to give you a picture of what this might look like, you would have a database with objectives. You could be managing your assets to minimize risk, minimize cost, or whatever. You might have different facets about your soil that might relate to risk of contamination or aggregate formation or ability to handle stormwater. And then you have ways for assessing and monitoring them. And so in our traditional measurement strategy here, we have several opportunities represented by these red lines to relay information into a soil asset management system. And so in this picture here, just to give you a picture of what this means, this is a scene from campus here. And there's resources depicted here that include cultural resources, stormwater management facilities, soil resources, tree resources, lampposts, pavement, buildings. All of these things are sort of tracked and managed in an asset management system. And so an activity like this would suddenly be recognized as degrading a resource and actually costing the community money. And in addition, information could be networked into our huge urban data sets that are getting increasingly large and complex and interesting, such as this one being compiled by the Urban Center for Computation. Of course, soils change over time. And this is just a picture of the resource site for soil profile rebuilding. It's a rehabilitation process that Dr. Chen and I worked on in the past. And there's things we can do to intervene with soils that that might be tracked in an asset management system. And it could include blended soils, such as we discussed earlier, that are stockpiled here. And changes from community gardening, which is what you see here on this Florida soil, where community gardening has actually developed a thicker A horizon on the right side, and on the left side is the same soil, but where they have not been gardening and adding organic material. And so that's what I'd like to propose. And I hope I haven't gone over time. I can hear the beeps reminding me of the time, but I can't actually see any of the time chats. So I hope that I was on time here. And I want to thank Tabinda Shah, who is an undergraduate student who worked on developing a soil asset management plan for the UBC campus. And
You were right on time.
All right.
Did great. You didn't need a bell either. We're really doing well here this afternoon. Okay, keep those questions coming for the panel session. We have one more speaker before that happens. And